Shebeen Chic is it's an interesting concept because it started off being like an eco bar. So the idea was that you don't have to spend a lot of money to make something great. You can build something out of very little if you need to. And it was very timely because we had just gone through a really crazy period in our history, which is the Celtic Tiger era, when we had spent loads of money and lots of very expensive bars were coming up all around town with loads of money spent on the fit out. It's not just your average pub, that's for sure. It's more like an arts collective. There's so much stuff going on. Like there's a restaurant here as well, live music downstairs, different live performances upstairs. So we have a huge variety of acts all the time, from comedy to trad nights. We have our own movie nights that we do downstairs as well. So it's a very creative space. The staff here are a very international set. It's like the Eurovision Song Contest here most nights. We have every country almost represented. And it's a lot of fun. Unfortunately, at the moment, we're under an eviction notice by our landlord. And so myself and the staff have been trying to fight to stay, because we believe that there's no good reason for this business to be closed down. There was a long-standing dispute between the tenant and the landlord. And unfortunately, the staff and myself have become the fallout of that dispute. It's not a dispute of our making. It's nothing that we could have changed. So our point was that, well, if they close the building, it'll be another vacant building in Dublin. It'll be another successful business that is closed unnecessarily. And there's another 21 jobs queuing up for the dole unnecessarily as well. So we thought it was worthwhile to propose to the landlord that we would stay for a short-term period at a minimum until they found a new tenant. And unfortunately, they have said no. There's 21 staff here. They're all young people, who are starting their lives off, and we all have commitments. We all have dependents and families. And initially, when I started this campaign, I wrote like thousands of letters to various TDs and senators and ministers. And actually, I've been really overwhelmed by the response that we've had. We've had a lot of people come back and try to help us. I have upward of sort of 10 to 12 TDs who have written letters on my behalf, who phoned the landlord, who've been petitioning with us, who've come on our protests with us. So we've had a huge amount of support, actually. John Halligan was great, Joe Higgins, Dahi Doolan from the Sinn Féin office has been fabulous. I think there's very little help for small businesses in general, and my opinion is that in this country that we've a lot of small little businesses that we really need to encourage and keep, because these are what keeps the economy going. Small businesses in Ireland, and there isn't enough attention on the small SMEs. They're focusing on our exports and they're focusing on multinational companies, but the bread and butter of this country are the small business and retailers, and a lot of them have been crippled by huge rents. Property has really destroyed this country, and it is continuing to do that, I think, in my opinion now, because the bottom line with this problem here is that the rent was extortionate, with a huge rent, which wasn't really viable. The rent was reduced, but not to a level, well, they came back and they reneged on that deal is the problem. That's where the dispute arose. But there's legislation coming through now for, leases whereby if you were tied into a very high rental lease, which a lot of companies would have been, especially all the retailers, that legislation has been delayed. Like it's still not through yet. And meanwhile, you have places closing all the time. Like in my view, a lot of places, retail shops, restaurants, bars, various places are closing unnecessarily. And I think that the streets in the country and cities in Ireland will be just barren of any kind of interest or creativity. We'll be left with humdrum, boring high streets. I think for our own particular situation, I really think that it's greed that has been the real problem here. Because although the legislation would have helped Shebeen if it had been in place earlier, it won't be coming through until later, so we've missed the boat on that legislation. The landlord here is willing to let this premises go vacant, and that in my mind is just utterly wrong. And the law unfortunately is on their side, because we were subject to a lease which had a clause in it which they evoked, so we couldn't defend that in law. If we are forced to go, if we're forced to close our doors, the business is gone, the goodwill will have gone from the company, the licence will go with us, so there'll be no licence left on the premises. So it'll be another vacant premises on the landscape in Dublin, with a landlord who wanted to get too high a rent from it. And I understand that he probably owes his bank a lot of money, but what's the point in chasing a rent that's not feasible? Like if the rent is a market rent of 70 and you're already paying 100, why chase 156 if it's not achievable? I just think it's a shame that the law and the greed of landlords really has destroyed this little small economy that is Shebeen.